Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, Chairman Tanner, for this opportunity. I rise today, along with Congressman Heller, to address the newest threat of drug smuggling into the United States and the southwest border. As drug violence wreaks havoc on our southern neighbor, the country of Mexico, the product of this narco-terrorism continues to fuel violent and ruthless acts and is floating now effortlessly across the U.S.-Mexico border into our community. We must do everything in our power to neutralize this insidious threat and stem the flow of narcotics and drug money that threatens our communities. The latest tool used by these drug traffickers are these small planes. These small planes that go largely undetected by our law enforcement community. Single-person ultralight aircraft that are flying low, as depicted in this image, make them, of course, very popular among enthusiasts, but is now a new tool that the drug cartels have adopted to corrupt this fine pastime. Every year now, hundreds of ultralights laden with illegal narcotics are flown over our southern borders and now landing in our backyards. Here's a map of my backyard. Southern Arizona is on the front lines of this border security crisis. The Tucson sector of the Border Patrol is the nation's largest and most porous part of the U.S.-Mexico border. Despite the difficult and rugged terrain, drug traffickers are stemming across the border by whatever means necessary. Sometimes they go under, but in the case of the ultralights, they are going over the border. In the Tucson sector, there are more drugs and illegal immigrants apprehended than in all other parts of the United States. Last fiscal year, the Border Patrol in the Tucson sector seized over 1.2 million pounds of marijuana. Other drugs were seized as well, like cocaine, like methamphetamines that Mr. Heller was talking about. In fiscal year 2009, there were over 240,000 apprehensions of illegal immigrants, those that we just apprehended in the Tucson sector of the Border Patrol. So we know that thousands and hundreds of thousands of people are crossing illegally. And now we have this latest weapon, the ultralight, that they are using to produce an ever-expanding arsenal from the narco-terrorists capable of not just transporting illegal drugs, but any number of dangerous payloads. These planes have now been reported flying up to 200 miles north of the border. I first learned about the illicit use of ultralights in a briefing from the United States Border Patrol. Their message was unambiguous. We need to crack down on ultralight aircrafts now. The National Drug Intelligence Center, in their 2010 National Drug Assessment, also identified ultralights as a growing threat. According to CBP Air and Marine Operations Centers based in Riverside, there were 193 suspected incursions into the United States, 135 confirmed incursions into the United States from ultralights from October 1st of last year through April. Some obvious examples. In October of 2008, we detected an unidentified northbound low-flying aircraft 12 miles north of Nogales, Arizona. A CBP surveillance helicopter launched from Tucson identified the low-flying aircraft as an ultralight. The pilot was forced down in Marana, Arizona. He was carrying a cargo over 225 pounds of marijuana. In November of 2008, near San Luis, field workers arrived for work and discovered a crashed airlight. The pilot was dead, 141 pounds of marijuana. December of 2008, the pilot of an ultralight collided with power lines and crashed southwest of Tucson, Arizona. He was carrying 250 pounds of marijuana. And just this past May, at 6:20 early on a Sunday morning, the North American Aerospace Defense Command detected a small, low-flying aircraft in southern Arizona near the border with Mexico. NORAD quickly scrambled 2 F-16s to intercept the ultralight, shadowing it for 30 minutes before it was forced back into Mexico. The threat is real. It is time for the federal government to get ahead of these drug smugglers. There is no excuse for the federal government to not act sooner on this known threat. So today, we're doing something about it. The problem has been that lightweight ultralights are not officially categorized as aircraft by the Federal Aviation Administration, so our law enforcement has not had the tools that they need to address the rising threat. And that is why I introduced H.R. 5307, the Ultralight Smuggling Prevention Act, along with my Republican colleague from Nevada, Congressman Dean Heller. This is a bipartisan, common-sense bill that will finally close the loophole that's been exploited by drug cartel kingpins and give our law enforcement the actual tools they need to fight this escalating crisis. H.R. 5307 will amend the Tariff Act of 1930 to include ultralight vehicle under the aviation smuggling provisions, finally giving law enforcement the tools that they need to prosecute these crimes to the fullest extent. Our bill will establish smuggling drugs on ultralights as for smuggling on airplanes or in cars or in trucks. Millions of pounds of marijuana are coming into the United States every single year. They're coming through on vehicles or they're coming through with people. And sometimes, more often, it's a combination of both. With our bill, individuals caught smuggling on ultralights will be prosecuted for using the ultralight in addition to being prosecuted for the drugs they have in their possession. This will carry a maximum sentence of up to 20 years and $250,000 fine, along with the 20 years in prison. The Ultralight Smuggling Prevention Act is a long overdue solution, which is why it's been received well in our community, and we've had several endorsements. For example, the Arizona Farm Bureau, the Arizona Cattle Growers Association, and the Pima County Sheriff's Office. In closing, Mr. Speaker, while the men and the women of the Border Patrol and of ICE have made great progress in stemming the flow of drugs and illegal immigrants, our southern border is not yet secure, and many of the people that I represent live in constant fear. The murder of my constituent, Rob Krentz, in March has heightened those fears and, quite frankly, has given rise to the anger and frustration that Southern Arizonans and all Americans feel toward our government's inability to live up to its first responsibility, ensuring the safety and security of all American citizens. Mr. Speaker, improving border security has been my top priority since I first came here in January of 2007. I have been steadfast in my support of increased funding to bring more agents and more assets to Southern Arizona, redeploying the National Guard, and passing a $600 million emergency border security funding bill. What so many members of Congress do not understand is that the Border Patrol is outmanned, they're outgunned, and they're out-resourced. So we must remain constantly vigilant and one step ahead of the enemy. The violent cartels of Mexico are exploiting a new weakness in our defense, and the bill that we are considering today will strengthen our national security. The bill will render useless the newest tool of the drug traffickers, making our communities safer. Again, I want to thank Mr. Heller again for joining me on this very important piece of legislation. I'd also like to express my appreciation to Chairman Tanner and to the staff, especially Jennifer McCadney, for moving this important legislation forward. With that, Mr. Speaker, I yield back.